Thank you everybody for joining. It's really good to see you. And this is our first fast track community conversation around AI. As I was saying earlier, at this point, I should actually just stop the call and say goodbye because I have my data, but I won't. As a prototyper, what we do is simulate the experiment and then leave. So the experiment was at least 10% of people interested in innovation and experimentation would join the call. If it was interesting around AI and innovation, and it wasn't a sales pitch, and it was only going to be shared knowledge about practical things. So we got 23% of people, so that's good based on the number of people that viewed. So very happy with that result. Okay, so for those that don't know me, my name is Leslie Barry. I run a company called Exponentially, and we help companies test and validate ideas at scale using a method called prototyping. We also have a piece of software we built to really manage and track this at scale, but this is not a sales pitch, that's just what we do. And really, my hope for this call is that I learn as much as you learn. I'm not by no means the definitive expert on all things, let me get some people in, on all things AI and innovation, but we have learned a few things over the last year or two. And that you leave here with a few answers to your many questions, which we have. But also, this is a conversation starter for learning more about this in the community and around the place. Welcome those that have just joined. So the way we're going to frame this today is, this is a Google Hangouts call, so it can get tricky to manage. So if you want to say something, click the button at the bottom of the screen, raise your hand, and we'll let you in, and you can either enlighten us or ask us some questions, and we'll just keep the conversation going. Then what we're going to do is I'm just going to give you just a 5-minute view, and Paddy, you can check me because I don't waffle. A 5-minute view on just loosely what we've learned at a high level around innovation, experimentation, and applying AI to that. We will provide notes after the call. We'll share the call. We're recording it, by the way, so if you don't want to be recorded, then let us know and we can edit out if we need to. So we'll be sharing the notes and the tools and the resources afterwards. And this is generally just a conversation. We're not selling anything. There's nothing of that nature. It's about learning from each other as a community. And after I've shared my 5-minute spiel, it'll be great to hear from you around what you've used and experienced from an AI perspective. Just briefly introduce yourself when you speak, so we can just get to know you. And once you're done with that, if we get to as far as that, I've captured all the very good questions in Slido. So I'll share that with you. We can then sort of vote and work our way down from the top and see where we end up. How's it sound? Good? Great. Okay, let's experiment. So the way I want to frame this is, if I prep for this over the last year or two since ChatGPT launched and everything has been going crazy, we think of innovation in a very simple way. So innovation is simply, you get a bunch of ideas, you prioritize those ideas, you run experiments, and you take some action on ideas that are actually working. And obviously, massively oversimplified, it's much, much harder to do that. First question is get people to actually run experiments, but we deal with that. So in each of those buckets, what we've seen is around ideation, and we'll touch on synthetic users too. Around ideation, we've used very simple tools there to effectively replace and not replace, to augment brainstorming. So what I mean by that is often what we'll do is, in the normal world, you'll get together, put some sticky notes up, get a bunch of ideas, cluster them, group them, rub our chins, take a good guess, and take it from there. And what we're trying to do, what we've been using ChatGPT and Claude and the various tools for, has been to help us really challenge our thinking, augment those ideas, run those ideas through and see if anyone else is doing this, get the counterpoint to those ideas, then take, for example, the top 10 current technology or social trends and run those against those ideas. And this really helps build up a pool of ideas. Second thing, which is really simple that we've been using in a practical sense, has been when we're running workshops, is to really do the normal clustering that we do. So the logical clustering of ideas, feeding back to the group and summarizing and all those simple and straightforward things, but it's massively accelerated the process. So instead of running a session and post-session, having to distribute all the information, within an hour, you've got all of this done. So it accelerates how we do this. And that's a very simple way of using it in ideation. We've also synthetic users. I've got some articles and things on that if you're interested. There's a company called Synthetic Users, actually, that does this. Jury's out. I'm a skeptic, massive skeptic, but I could be convinced. Are useful to run ideas against and get them to give feedback, because they're taking the aggregated, very optimistic, positive view of someone who does all their homework and feeds it back to you, which makes it quite unrealistic, but it helps augment ideation. Second thing is prioritization, quite a similar thing where we take priorities, for example, through various methods, but we like using effort value. So from an effort value perspective, how do we go about using the AI to support that thinking, to validate any assumptions you're making about how much effort it would be or how much value it would be. Also then applying our relative knowledge to what the amount of effort that organization would take to execute an idea, applying that through and running that through AI to help us do this. Also simple tools, ChatGPT and Claude. Experiment design gets interesting because there we're using learned knowledge around, like with Rapidly, we've got some AI built in there to help us really leverage off past ideas and then filter our experience of what's worked in the past for that organization or industry or vertical, and then guide us around suggested ideas and also suggested experiments on how we could test these, and also help us think through XYZ hypotheses and understand what our hypotheses should look like. And then you've got companies like HeatSeeker AI, which is an Australian company, a friend of mine, who is trying to solve the problem of how do you actually run these experiments. And often experiments are simple Facebook ads or LinkedIn ads or some sort of landing page or these kinds of things. So there's various tools that are trying to do this. And I know this is really high level. And for experiment, for taking action, like one of the questions was, how do you actually test this out in the market? So once you're trying to get a version 0 out, there's tools like code generators for non-coding people, which drives engineers crazy. But basically, you've got V0, you've got Cursor, you've got Lovable, you've got Manus, which are doing this. And what's happening here, and I just missed this, is I really dislike the term vibe coding, but this is non-engineers taking ideas and instantiating them. But term aside, it's actually super powerful because it's going to create massive chaos because everyone thinks they're an engineer, which they're not. But it's going to really take a step forward in terms of how do you show a customer very quickly what you have in mind. And even if that's all it does and brings it up to that point, that becomes really powerful. So that's at a very high level. What you've seen, obviously we can dig into many aspects of that, but end of me waffling. Is there any, I'd love to learn from you who have been doing this, how you've applied AI into running experiments or improving your innovation process or approach. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share with us?
I can go if there's nobody else. So my name is Klaus, and I've been working with as head of prototyping in a tele company. It's a big telco in the Nordics and Baltics, and for the past 6 years, we ran around 1,000 experiments and generated around 100 million euros in new revenue through that process. And Pretotyping was the foundation and bedrock of that. And so ever since ChatGPT and the first tools arrived in the market, we started applying them mostly into the operational side of things, where we basically made the copywriting with ChatGPT and the pictures with Midjourneys and stuff like that. And we basically took the design process from, I think, 2 to 3 days down to 30 minutes within a very short amount of time. So we was quite effective on that side. But I should say, Leslie, that the lovables and cursors and all of that makes the vibe coding and the process quite easily done now. And we also apply that right now. But what we've done in the beginning of the process was, as you said, the ideation process is quite interesting, because at first when you ask ChatGPT or Claude or some of these tools, they're not very creative to begin with, to be honest. So what we did, we created a context page in Google Sheets where we put in 9 different industries I think we had 20 different business models in there. And then we compared that to all the questions and answers, and we got back from ChatGPT and made it have a conversation with that sheet, so that every time we had something around, let's say a value-added service we wanted to test out and see if that would make sense, we made sure that ChatGPT had a discussion with our Google Sheet, with all these 9 industries and all these 20 different business models, to generate something uniquely, which at the end of this process was quite creatively done, because we saw some examples of stuff that we never thought of ourselves. So that makes quite good sense. So I guess the conclusion from our learning is that context is really the key here. You can ask everything to an AI bot or AI tool, but if you don't bring the right context into play, it's going to be difficult. So we built up heavily on the context side and have sheets and prompts that are several pages long to actually generate some stuff there. And lately we've been applying a perplexity and deep research very much into the beginning of the funnel, where we try to understand what is the macro trends, where the market's heading, and making market analysis and ideation on that. So, and I say this is really interesting. It generates 5, 6, 7 pages of market insights within 2-3 minutes, which is very, 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 very high level and generally, but it's also very, very deep in some of the areas where you can basically have one person from the team normally did this for us. Now we actually have just an AI agent doing this for us. So it's going to be, I guess within a few years, we're all going to work with different agents all the time, and have to learn about that. I think we applied, around 10, 12 different AI tools in the process right now, and I think that the number will just grow on and be bigger. So that's really interesting.
That's amazing. Thanks, Klaus. Thanks for sharing that. Glenn, did you have your hand up?
Oh, sure. How you doing, Leslie?
Yeah. Oh, great. I haven't seen you for years, man. Good to see you.
Been a while. Yeah. So I wouldn't say we're like very sophisticated in our usage, though. We're using, like, I'm going broad at the moment, but haven't really got deep into usage. But we've been using ChatGPT since 3, whatever the big one was that everyone caught fire with, to do kind of similar to Klaus. Like, it started for us with trying to get it to generate documentation and marketing pages and stuff like that. And we've got a very technical product, so we weren't thrilled with the results necessarily. But for me, the value there was really about getting past that blank canvas state where you just got a blank page, you don't know how to start, and almost some frustration-driven documentation where it's just like, no, you got it all wrong. What you needed to say was, and then all of a sudden, bang, you've got like the creative spark to go write what you needed to write. But it's got a lot better for us. Like, I'm finding I'm less frustrated and more tweaking with the content recently, especially like we use Claude a lot more now than ChatGPT. Not that I've got objective metrics as to why, that's just kind of what's stuck for us. And having worked at a previous place that has a very like narrative-driven written culture, like it was all very much like you write down the press release first, you start with that. That's the thing you can throw away because it's cheap. It's been great having it as almost like an accountability partner on that, where it's just like, here's this, like, start asking questions of it, like you were saying, like, what's wrong with it? What haven't I thought of? And only recently, the last couple of weeks, I've started really getting into the vibe coding thing using Cursor primarily. And it's blown me away. Like, I do have a software background, but at my last employer, like, to get the kind of high fidelity thing we present in a prototyping sense to a customer that didn't just look like scribbles on a paper. Like, we wanted something that was, you know, the fake front door, basically. It'd involve weeks of collaboration with the design team and maybe trying to like steal a few days out of an engineer. And now it's literally like an hour at mostly. And we're happy to throw it away. I think that's the thing that I like about it. Like, previously, as soon as you get engineering involved, there's like a level of commitment to that, because like, oh my God, we've spent weeks on this and like a couple of days of this person's time. Like, we've got to make it work. And that's, I don't know, I just feel like it's the wrong commitment point for that kind of stuff. Like, the fact that these are so disposable is actually what's super appealing to me.
That's a really good insight, because part of the problem with people that we work with is everyone's overcommitted because you've hustled for that engineering resource. So you can't back out of the project when you should if the experiment fails. Really interesting. Anyone else been using anything smart?
Oh, one other one I think my CEO stumbled on this for us. Notebook LM, if you've ever used that, they've got this feature where you can basically have two like NPR style podcast hosts generate content and generate a podcast. It started feeding all of our marketing sites and material and stuff into it and having it narrate back. And it was really eye-opening to us. Again, a bit like the frustration with the early ChatGPT, where you're like, oh, how did it get that perspective? You're like, that's not the message we wanted people to take away from this page.
Okay.
We need to go back and fix this. And so also, again, as another perspective of like, what would a reasonable person take from this? Really showed us some blind spots in the way we were delivering stuff.
Yeah, that's really useful. Okay, Warren, I haven't seen you for a decade. Are you doing anything interesting? You're always doing something interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to throw it back. I'm going to take a different approach. Of course, we
yes, I expected that.
With really large enterprise clients.
Yeah,
and we're coming up with ideas and playing it back to them. And we're finding resistance in places that I probably didn't expect. I can give some great examples, but this one that I was doing today, which is kind of really front of mind at the moment, we are making a risk management tool for a very large mining company. You might remember the origins of that, Leslie,
I do.
The early days of the data factory. Well, that's still going on 13 years later. But we are using large language models to give recommendations on the relationship between the task you're about to perform. So let's say I'm going to go and I'm going to change a high pressure fitting on a hose. We look at the task that you've been assigned and we assess that from a risk management perspective, and we say, you are a person on a copper mine in the Spence mine in Latin America, in Chile. You are about to change a high pressure fitting at this location, at these geo coordinates. The weather is this. So we've got all this context that we're building into the task that we've assigned to someone. And then we say, we know that this company that we're working with at the moment has this risk framework. And here's a long list of all their risks, and here's a long list of all their controls. So we went back to them and said, here, look what we can do. We can automate something that takes someone about 11 minutes at the moment. We can do this in 45 seconds. And we got an incredible amount of resistance where they said, well, we don't want you to feed them our risk and control framework. That's our intellectual property. Like if you use that in your prompt, you're giving that away. And they're right. You are. When you use something, you are donating it into the model unless you add specific context to stop that from being the case. And they said, yeah, we get the 11-minute to 45-second benefit, but you can't give away our risk and control framework information to this. So they have put up a lot of resistance for it. And this is pretty consistent. Like I'm seeing for a lot of the projects that we're doing, when we we're doing one for a financial services company that automates the retirement planning process. They're saying, you can't give away our secret sauce for how we do this financial modeling.
Yeah.
What do we do? Like, how do we get over this? Like, I agree.
Well, I've got an answer. I've got the answer. We've been working with regulated companies, financial services. Sorry to cut you off, but
no.
And they're wrong. You're not giving it away because if you hit it through the API, it's private to you in a private instance. And depending which model you use, it's not true.
There's your point, though. There's your point. It does. And where you can control it, maybe through the use of model content protocol, like you can specify at the point that you're creating it. But they point blank refuse. Even when we say, dude, look, we've made an MCP server here that we add that here to say, and please don't remember this. They still don't want to do it. They still have this, the gremlin's going to steal my stuff.
So Oliver wants to jump in. He might have some insight for us.
No, thank you. So I'm the CIO at CBM Australia. We're a not-for-profit organisation, and we do a fair bit of work for DFAT, and we've got contract work with DFAT. And similar to Warren, my grey area at the moment is we are given public sector data, and we're the data custodian for that. But it's a very grey area where I have no clarity as to whether or not we're allowed to put that into a system. So at the moment, it's a go easy, let's not. we're predominantly, so I'm focused. We're being a charity, we get great Microsoft pricing. So I've basically hardline and said we're only using Copilot. We're using Copilot Chat at the moment, and we're piloting the paid version of Copilot to try and contain some of that within our environment. But yeah, I've still got that grey area of I don't know whether I'm allowed, and DFAT can't tell me.
We've got a point blank no from ASIC. We work with ASIC, and they have said you are not allowed.
They said no. Yeah.
So
look, none of our data agreements say anything about AI.
So Nolan was next. This is a good conversation. So pop in there, Nolan.
I was just going to say that for my projects, I've been, and this is my hobby stuff, I've been surprised at how creative ChatGPT is coming up with my secret sauce ideas that I thought were super special and nobody knew about them. Like, that's another way to like, how special is my secret sauce in the post ChatGPT world now that I can instantly find everything, and like it might not be as special as you think. There's that angle too.
And for content, I'll circle back to you in a moment, Oliver. So, and then we'll shift it to another question. But Nolan, tell them what you do so they understand the context of your comment.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Nolan. I work for Intel during the day, and then on my free time, I do lots of different things. But currently working on, I have the problem that I see this vision in my head of a fun project to work on from an engineering perspective, and I'm trying to get better at making it useful for people, and I'm trying to dissuade this part of my brain while encourage, it needs to be tested. You want other people to use it. So the Pretotyping perspective. One project I'm working on now is trying to reduce glare that people that have light sensitivity experience, and sunglasses don't work very well because your eyes just dilate, or your exposure just kind of goes up internally to your eyes. So lots of those solutions don't work for people that have light sensitivity, and I'm trying to do something that's failed several times in the past before for technical and non-technical reasons. So it's been fun to both work on the technical side and try and solve those problems, as well as, do people actually want this thing? Like, how do I know? And get to approach that with Leslie and other people. So it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Glenn, you said you had something to add or perspective?
For anyone who wants to talk about private models, I'm happy to reach out after this. I'll find you in the Slack. Have a chat with me, because I've done lots of this stuff before. You can definitely run stuff privately, though.
I tried Olmo, but it cost me $40,000 to set it up. So I don't think that's sustainable.
No, but we can do it much cheaper. I'm not pitching my stuff here. I can tell you how to do it with like open source foundational models, all the cloud hosted stuff, whatever you need. But
yeah, Glenn's an expert on this. So for Oliver and Warren, you could probably connect afterwards and unpack that a bit further. Okay, so what I think I'd like to do now is just switch gears to the questions. And yeah, Warren and Oliver, if you're not satisfied, jump in and keep pushing. It's okay. So what I'm going to do is just share a link. I'll share the screen and a link to Slido. And if you could just take a minute or two and just vote on a few of the questions, then we can tackle it in that order, I think. If you haven't used Slido before, just scan the QR code on your mobile and you're able to vote, or I'll copy the link. I've dropped it in the chat. You can just go to the link and then you can upvote on the various ideas. And Jody, I saw you pop in there. Hello.
I like Jody Rowland's one. How do we stop IT from mucking around with our stuff? Man,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Yeah. Okay. You can keep voting. I just want to stop annotating and yeah. Okay. So let's just take it. Has it reordered it? Yes, it has. Good stuff. So I cheated and tagged them on the top because we did mention in the invitation around synthetic users, and I'm sure we're all interested in this. So Geo, who's part of the Fast Track community, asked, what do you think about interviews with synthetic users? Now, I would love to hear what you think. I have done a little bit of playing around with this and testing and experimenting. So I think it was about 8 months ago, the founder of Synthetic Users, the app, or also the service, reached out to go as part of a Discord group to be able to test it. And they do run a full service. And effectively what it does is if you go to the service, it'll take your idea, it'll frame a problem statement and a potential user and find some users for you and try and run experiments and opinions against those users. And I'm on the fence about this because my opinion and the research I've done is it's not humans. And we've run 4,000 experiments over the last 7 years with our enterprise customers, and humans are crazy. Like they are random. All you can predict is that you can predict nothing, and no idea is similar, no idea is the same. Everything that you're trying, like that you believe to be true is not, or if you believe it's not to be true, then it is, etc. So I'm not sure synthetic user can simulate that randomness of our users behave when they are affected by emotions or events, or I don't know, someone rattles the financial global ecosystem in a week, or these kinds of things. That's my opinion. It's not data yet, and I haven't run extensive tests on it. The other thing from the research I've seen is that they are overly optimistic. So they try, when you ask them a question, they do all their homework, which humans don't do. When you run a survey, they answer it 100%. They always answer it optimistically and positively. They'll very rarely, they're trying too hard to please you all the time. So that's my view on synthetic users. I think they are useful where you are doing ideation to run ideas against, just to get the sense of the full body of knowledge of an LLM around what it understands about human behavior. So maybe as a feeder to ideation and prioritization, it could be interesting. Maybe as some light research, but I don't know. Klaus, you raised your hand.
Yeah, and I just basically just want to echo what you're saying here, because this is opinion-based data, so and humans are crazy. Humans are only measured by doing in this world, so we should do that. And my team and I, we try to actually build a synthetic database on top of the 1,000 experiments we done on human interactions and human behaviors, but we just had too little data still to actually build that. But as soon as we have a synthetic database built on top of behavioral data where humans actually are doing something around in different contexts, then I think it will be interesting. But as soon as that happens, we will not go for any further. And basically, this is comparable to conjoins or interviews or focus groups. People say what they think we want to hear. So it's basically rubbish data that we'll bring into the funnel. So, yeah. But as you say, probably in the very early stages of just understanding where you normally would interview people, then can be quite useful, but not as a validation element of any kind.
100% agree with you. Anybody else have a view?
we did a little experiment that did pay dividends, where we gave each of the synthetic audience a personality type to try and give that human. So we experimented by saying, you are a person with this Myers-Briggs personality type. Please answer with this. And then that didn't really work because that was a bit nuts. But the one that did work was, you are a personality type with the thinking hats concept, white hat, green hat, black hat. That one worked. That one was probably closer to what you get from humans. You are a black hat. You are a disagreeable person. You want to stop this project, please. And when we said, give us that full 360 of every thinking hat, the response was a bit easier. So trying to make the synthetic human a bit more human.
That's really useful. Thank you. Anybody else have anything?
I think that last use case is closer to how I use it as an accountability partner, almost like help me see my blind spots kind of thing. But my concern with like the synthetic user at scale type, like would this work, is that these are all like stochastic models. You're getting like the average output of something. And I assume it's an apocryphal tale, but there's that story of like the cockpits in fighter jets and how they were built for like a person of average dimensions. And then when the US Army went and surveyed all their pilots, there wasn't a single pilot who was those dimensions. Like no one is the perfect average of all the things. And so I'm just super skeptical that it can even work if what it's doing is giving you the perfect average person, basically, is kind of what even if you qualify it, you're getting the average person in that particular thing. And I don't know if they exist. So like what assumptions are you making from that if you're already off at the wrong start?
I wonder if you take that further, just thinking that through, because when you're building initially and you're innovating, you're building for the early adopters, outliers who might adopt your thing, and then you craft it, and eventually you move to the mass market and you're actually working for your average user. And I wonder if you were able to retroactively fit the profiles of your average user into your own environment and then project out future features which would be really boring but appeal to your average user. So I'm thinking, don't want to say brands, but imagine a big CRM company has been around for 20 years who invented the cloud, those kinds of companies, and they're really looking for incremental, boring stuff that just keeps them sticky in their customer base. That might be interesting. Interesting. Okay, moving on to the next question. Got another. Are you just a quick check-in? This is our first time we're doing this. Are you happy with this format? Is this working for you? Good. Okay, cool. Okay. Lots of thumbs. That's lovely to see. Okay, so the next question was, what AI tools help speed up experimentation? That's a really good question. Not sure how to pronounce it. Is Burak on the call? I don't think so. It'd be nice to know more about that. But generally speaking, I would assume speed up experimentation means how fast can we generate the output of an experiment, or it could be mean about the design. Klaus, over to you.
Yeah. So how I'm reading this question is that at the moment we're working with a company called Fifth Row, and they have an app store of AI agents, and one of them is a venture builder app where they basically from the get-go have the ideation, and then they build 100 ideas. One of the agents built 100 ideas that is aligned with the strategy, and then it goes out to actually prioritize and vet out some of the shortlisting things. And I think they build 5 fake door web pages and test them into the market, all done by AI agents. And the only one that is human interaction is the incorporation with the Facebook manager algorithm. So there are tools. I think there's coming tools on the go right now that is building some of these stuff. And we're still testing it, so I can't really say if it's good or not. But it's going to be really interesting to see some of these tools that are going to take from ideation all the way to experimentation and validation and analysis in one go. And this takes under a day to complete everything. So it compared to what a venture building process normally takes, it's probably 6 to 9 months. So it's pretty insane what some of these tools can do. But again, bear in mind, it's still under investigation. But I think within a very short amount of time, we will see more and more of these tools being very helpful in this matter.
It's going to be crazy when we're running rapid experiments against synthetic users and validating the synthetic users, which then build cursor apps and then feed off exactly the circle of nothingness, and we can just sit and do nothing.
I guess that's the way they did the COVID vaccine, right? So they ran 1 billion different elements towards the flu, and then found out which one of them actually did the job right. So I think it's the same way here.
Oliver commented around, do we really need to go faster? And it's a good comment. And I think the context is speeding it up. Like if I put my working with enterprises hat on, it's absolutely, we need to do it. It takes weeks and months, and it's just a massive time cycle for simple stuff where you have layers and layers of processes, block processes and people whose job it is to not block stuff, but to just be part of the food chain. They can get compressed and take that out. Okay. And jump in anytime if you have anything to say. Yeah, Oliver?
Oh yeah, no, certainly. It's just from the amount of tools that are coming out on a daily basis. So they're going. So just the process of experimenting and trying. Every time I open up YouTube, there's and you go down the rabbit hole, and then you're off for who knows how many hours. I was having a look at Firebase Studio, and particularly as some of the stuff that you can do in that vibe code based with Firebase Studio, Copilot Studio, Google Studio.
Yeah, we're in that messy phase of there's a million options, and like what do you commit to, and who's going to be here and who's not, and what works the best and what doesn't, and you need an AI to figure out the AIs at the moment, I think. Okay, so next question was, can AI generate ideas that are truly original and innovative? I don't know. Any thoughts?
I think it's come back to the context that I talked about a little bit earlier. So if you bring in context that is really like when we humans actually get ideas, we often go and have different pieces of context put into our brain, and then we go into the shower and then don't think about it, and then constantly we think about something new. If you can generate that process for AIs and be very specific on the context and very, very deep on the context, I think it's possible, but it's not there yet. I see it. I haven't been able to generate any truly innovative, crazy stuff yet. So the moonshots is not really there as of such. But the blank canvas situation is very, very helpful here, because it generates a speedy process to actually start going, and then your own mind will start to fluctuate into the realms of creativity.
I think if we fast forward, let's say 2 years, I think the constraint for AI to generate original ideas is the fact that it has to deal with dumb humans in the interim, and the fact that we have the desire and the need to understand how it does things, because we think about the scientific method. So if we can't prove it, then it can't be true. I don't believe that to be true. I think when we take the constraints off, and it doesn't have to speak to us in code, and it doesn't have to type, and it doesn't have to use our very, very slow voice interface to interact, and we allow it to point at the problem and figure it out without constraints. Of course, that's dangerous, potentially. Maybe that's where the magic will happen, because we're trying to get it to think like we think, and maybe that's not the answer. Maybe the answer is it needs to think like it thinks. Never know. We'll see.
That's interesting. I just reminded that I had a case where I was writing a science fiction novel for the future, and I gave that science fiction, I think it was 40 pages of a novel I wrote, and I gave that to ChatGPT to actually generate ideas around that context. And because the context was changed from the real world that is today, it started to actually generate stuff that was not mostly new creative stuff, but it was definitely out there, where it's more creative than what we see when you just prompt on today's world. So that again, the context matters. But I think you're onto something here. If you actually put out the restraints of the human body and the language and all that, then might be something there interesting.
We're very slow. We need to let them talk to each other.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one was how can we safely connect internal data to AI workflows? Glenn, do you want to expand on that, or have we discussed that with the Warren and Oliver discussion?
Sorry, on my phone, so having to find the button. I guess this prompted by Jensen at NVIDIA got asked like the founder of NVIDIA got asked, what's the next wave of AI for enterprise? And his answer was something I'm paraphrasing. Companies are sitting on these gold mines of data. And so the next wave is understanding how we connect AI to these gold mines. And I think data architecture is just being able to, it's not a solved problem in companies today. And now we've got this really accelerated scenario of how do we connect, not even people anymore, like autonomous systems into these things. So I wasn't sure how much other people are thinking about that. I obviously think about connectivity and security and stuff a lot, given what I do, but I'm wondering what the other perspectives are.
I want to read back to the old BI CRM is going to solve everything. This is my cynical hat on. Going to solve everything perspective, because all these systems live on the premise that the data is organized, and the data is not organized, and is never organized, and is not connected in most organizations. It's just this mess of stuff that humans are trying to keep going. And the counterpoint to my own point is what AI is really good at is taking unstructured data and making sense out of it. So is it about connecting it to the internal workflows, or is it about the challenge of giving it access to that in a way that's unconstrained to some extent, and the risk around that?
Yeah, I think it's both, to be honest. I think there's, you mentioned CRM companies that have been around for 20 years. There's lots of companies that have many decades of architectural decisions that aren't wrong. The things that are running where they're running for various reasons. And now you've got, systems that want GPU or foundational models, these things are all in other places, and it's well, now there's a whole new concept of how do we actually connect these things, because nothing is in the same place anymore, and it's unrealistic to think you're going to consolidate them all into one place.
Yeah, that's spot on. Does anyone else have a view? Oliver?
Feel bad don't want to dominate conversations, and I do want others to join in. So yeah, we're in the same boat. So again, I'm going mad to try and get Microsoft House, so Microsoft Purview, to try and get that up and going. So my biggest fear is that oversharing. It's what can. So yes, it's all within the safety of our environment, but somebody asking a question and finding the answer to something that they're not supposed to know about. So it's more so what we're sharing internally amongst ourselves, that we don't overshare too much stuff, and that the AI has access to it.
That's a good point, because you've got this this embedded culture in companies, which is right, where people protect data at different layers, and the data is the power and knowledge is the power. And if someone asks, what's this person earning, or what's the salary list, and the AI actually answers that. So it's how do you keep information out of the AI models potentially, and how does it know? That's really difficult. It's a challenge. Jody, I saw you made a comment. Do you want to chat?
Yeah, I was sort of going to add to that I work at an organisation that has 40 years of data all around winemaking. So everything that's happened in the vineyards, everything that happens every step of winemaking, which ones made it to be, things like Grange, for example, and which ones didn't. And it's in a really unstructured setup, and we often have this conversation about trash or treasure. And then as soon as we go to do the piece of work of, okay, let's go and decode the way this, the back end data structures, it's like the project's a 2-year project to get it done. And I was like, can't we just put it all in somewhere and say, what's in there? What can you find for me? Sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there has to be a better way.
There must be. I think this is the better way. I think we're the blockers, and the challenge is as soon as there's a breach of this kind of data through one of the LLMs, which is inevitable, must happen, we might roll everything back again. So what's the risk around that? Okay, we've got 10 minutes left. So should we keep going with the next question? Does someone have a burning question that's on your mind that you want to pop in?
I've got one, and sorry, I just answered one, but kind of thinking about, and it's sort of thinking about the IT blocking us, but I think from a like working within a corporate, I think that we're stopped at the moment from thinking we've got, Excels with macro, then people went and built Power Apps, then people went and bought, SharePoint sites and all these little home built things. Should we be incrementally improving those into little mini, I don't know, custom GPTs, or should we be sort of wiping the floor clean and just starting again? It's like I kind of feel like there's this almost like an iPhone generation that we started with Excels, then we went to Power Apps, and is AI the next version of that? And do we incrementally make those things better, or is now the time to wipe the floor clean and go get rid of all of that rubbish and singular stuff? And how do you optimize the whole process? But again, it starts to feel too big, and then nothing happens.
Yeah. Does anybody have an opinion?
We've been doing this for years. This goes back to Lotus Notes. Some of you guys probably aren't even old enough to know. But Lotus Notes, anyone could throw one together, and before you knew it, 1,000 people did, and 900 of them were hopeless and useless, but 100 of them turned into business-critical tools that businesses got built on. So it's no new problem. We've just got a new generation of ways of inflicting the problem. But just do it. Do lots of them. It gives us the ability to do lots of experiments, and then you double down and build the ones that worked out. You can put a bullet in the ones that don't work out really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, MS Access. Yeah, there was another nightmare. Good grief, the memory lane. And also, I also think I think what AI is going to unlock is I don't know what the percentage is of structured enterprise data, but I would imagine it's in the low tens, if that. And most of the data is sitting in unstructured spaces, and it doesn't look like data because you can't access it, or it's in humans' heads which leave the place. And as soon as we have a mechanism to put a layer on top of that unstructured data and ask it across domains, because the silos we're talking about exist within the organization. So imagine if you had all the risk and the legal and the marketing and like in your case, the winery data in one place, what information you could unlock. Like, can we do this thing? Can't we do this thing? You could take out layers and layers of blockers and process. So do you like in a siloed way optimize like agents around those different pieces, or you take a horizontal view and test and see what don't we know and what can we discover by horizontally working across organizations? Once again, as an experiment. And the answer to probably Warren and Oliver's question too is, can you run an experiment to prove to those customers that this information is either A, safe, or maybe not as proprietary as you think? Interesting. Okay, we've got 7 minutes left. Paddy, you haven't said anything.
Just been listening in there, Leslie, but I think for me, one of the builds on that is, and for those, I'm at Kmart and worked in enterprise for a while. I think enterprise businesses are ripe for real disruption over the next period because of the lack of ability to be able to deal with the types of challenges around governance, the way that actual customers want to interact and want to behave with products is going to evolve and change, is probably one of my hypotheses there. And I think there's a real nexus here around new startups that'll come through that it'll disrupt those that are using these tools in a way that they're way more comfortable with than we currently can be comfortable with. And I think it's going to be an interesting period to see how traditional enterprise businesses cope with new up-and-comers that don't necessarily have the governance history we have.
And they are tiny teams, literally, of 5 or 10 people running with billion-dollar businesses and opportunities, and it's not hype, it's real. Okay, we've got 5 minutes left. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining the call. Super interesting. I've already learned a ton. Like I said, I didn't think we're going to get past 2 or 3 questions. There's another 17 in there, and they're very good. So We'll collate all of that. We'll drop that as thought starters into the Fast Track community group. If you haven't joined it, join. It's just a place for us to chat about all these things. We'll share the video conversation. A lot of people that couldn't join have asked if we could share that. So hopefully that's okay. And I hope you got a lot of value out of this. We definitely want to do this again. And yeah, I'd love to get feedback either now or afterwards or in the community. We're experimenters, so we're happy to say that was a massive fail, and then we'll make it better and tell us why. Or that was a massive success. I don't care either way. Well, I care. I don't mind either way because it's an opportunity to improve. So thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time and sharing your knowledge. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you.
Leslie, thanks everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your evening. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers.